At Qingtang Academy, several students watched as a commotion broke out inside one of the classrooms. A student angrily shouted for someone to give back his sister's medicine. That student was Lin Yu, a senior at Qingtang Academy. He threatened to make them regret what they had done. This guy right here is our main protagonist. The two young men bullying him only laughed. One of them was Zhang Yang, another senior at Qingtang Academy. He arrogantly mocked Yu's threat, finding it hilarious coming from someone whose vitality score was only 0.62. Another student pointed out that Zhang Yang's vitality score was 3.5. Because of that, he advised Yu, who was even weaker than an ordinary person, to stop acting tough. The student added that if not for Yu's exceptionally talented younger sister, there was no way Yu would have even been accepted into the academy. Zhang Yang smirked and asked Yu whether he wanted the medicine back. Then he deliberately dropped it onto the floor while telling Yu to come pick it up himself. Yu shouted for him to stop and rushed forward to catch it. However, the vial hit the ground and shattered instantly. Yu froze in shock. At that exact moment, Zhang Yang grabbed him by the collar. Then he threw Yu straight into the trash bin. Zhang Yang coldly declared that trash belonged in the dumpster anyway. Suddenly, someone shouted that the teacher was heading toward the classroom. Yang's friend sneered that trash should stay together with other trash before the two finally walked away. Yu sadly stared at the wasted medicine scattered across the floor. It was the nutrient solution needed to maintain his sister's health. Now he would need to work overtime again just to earn enough money to buy another one. Deep down, he swore that Zhang Yang and Zhao Lei would eventually pay for this. Just then, Yu was surprised when someone extended a hand toward him. It was Lin Xin, another senior student at Qingtang Academy. She gently asked whether he was all right. Yu accepted her hand before quietly telling her that he was fine. He thanked her for helping him. She smiled warmly and suggested that they head back together. However, before they could leave, someone suddenly shouted at Yu through his watch, demanding to know whether he was planning to skip work again. The voice angrily pointed out that Yu had not shown up for his shift yet, even though he was already late. The moment Yu heard that, he immediately rushed off. Everything happened so quickly that Lin Xin could not even react in time. A few minutes later, Yu rode his bicycle through the city streets. In the year 4832 of the old century, a cataclysm descended upon the world and brought with it a phenomenon known as the corruption. As humanity struggled against the crisis, people gradually began surpassing their physical limits and awakening supernatural abilities. Those who awakened such powers became known as warriors. They earned the highest respect and privileges because they stood on the front lines protecting humanity itself. Time eventually entered year 1 of the High Martial Era after humanity discovered a terrifying truth. Even death itself could not stop the corruption. The dead would rise again as mindless walking corpses driven purely by bloodlust. Humanity referred to them as reanimated corpses. Eventually, people discovered that the only way to completely eradicate the corruption was through cremation, and Yu's part-time job after school every single day was to work at the crematorium, incinerating the bodies brought back from the battlefield front lines. When Lin Yu arrived at the crematorium, he immediately put on his protective suit before pressing a button to open the heavy metal doors. The subscription fee for his sister's nutrient pod was almost due. He needed to earn enough money to pay the 200,000 fee before the end of the month. His younger sister had awakened her powers shortly after entering her sophomore year. She possessed the ultra-rare talent of psychokinesis, and her vitality score had shattered past 10,000. However, on her 17th birthday, she suddenly collapsed into a coma and never woke up again. Yu headed toward the corpses, waiting for cremation. On the table to the left lay a giant wolf, while a muscular man rested on the table to the right. Yu himself had been born completely talentless. Back then, his sister had always been the one protecting him. But now, the roles had reversed, and he had become the one taking care of her instead. He earned 20,000 for every corpse he cremated. If he handled 4 more bodies, he would finally have enough money to replace the broken medicine and continue paying for the nutrient pod. Yu pushed the man's corpse toward the incinerator. Suddenly, black mist began leaking out from the corpse's body. Every corpse delivered to the crematorium carried traces of corruption. Even the smallest mistake could result in a violent death or transform someone into a monster. That danger was exactly why the job paid such an absurd amount, despite barely anyone being willing to work there. However, Lin Yu suddenly sensed that something was wrong. He had never seen anything like this before. The black mist was swirling unnaturally toward the window beside him. Confused, he removed his mask while wondering what exactly it was. Then, the mist suddenly slipped through the vent. At that moment, Yu became deeply alarmed. His eyes widened in shock when the black mist suddenly shot directly into his forehead. He suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of comfort spread throughout his body. He wondered what exactly was happening to him. Then, within the black mist, silhouettes of warriors fighting on a battlefield began appearing before his eyes. Soon after, he witnessed the memories of the man whose body the mist had emerged from earlier. That man's name was Li Yang. A fellow soldier once asked Yang what he planned to do after graduation. With complete confidence, Li Yang answered that he was obviously going to join the military. Not long afterward, an officer congratulated Yang for successfully becoming a member of the new recruit company under the 38th Army's Special Operations Brigade. Yang proudly saluted and swore that he would never let down the country or its people. During training, their superior constantly reminded them that soldiers bled less in battle by sweating more during practice. Only by endlessly pushing their vitality and repeatedly breaking through their physical limits could they awaken the true potential hidden within their bodies. So Yang trained relentlessly. Later, he fought fiercely on the battlefield as urgent reports announced that the front defensive line had already been torn apart by alien beasts. Hill 301 was on the verge of collapsing at any moment. Yang shouted for everyone to kill the alien beasts and defend their homeland at all costs. And that was where Li Yang ultimately met his end. A screen suddenly appeared before Yu's eyes, displaying the message, Soul Gazing System Loading. Yu's face instantly turned pale. He was horrified after realizing that he had just witnessed the past memories of a deceased warrior. Then the system notified him that the Soul Devouring system had officially been activated. However, Yu failed to notice that the wolf lying on the nearby table had already stood back up. Still stunned, Yu questioned what exactly the Soul Devouring system was supposed to be. Suddenly, the wolf fully rose onto its feet. Yu immediately realized how bad the situation had become. A level 1 alien beast had reanimated. The beast let out a loud roar, then it lunged directly toward him. Yu instinctively raised his arms to block its razor-sharp teeth. The impact slammed him onto the ground. At the same time, a voice inside his head announced that it had successfully read the soul memory of level 1 warrior Li Yang. Yu was then given a choice between 3 abilities: Immortal Will, Basic Military Martial Arts, or Ambitious Spirit. Given the situation he was in, Yu did not hesitate at all and immediately chose option B, Basic Military Martial Arts. Meanwhile, the chain wrapped around the reanimated alien beast's neck suddenly snapped apart. The system then informed Yu that actual combat was required to increase the proficiency of the skill. The alien beast's claws violently tore free. Then it swung toward him. Yu quickly slid backward to evade the attack. Suddenly he felt an intense surge of strength flow through his body, as though he had been injected with pure energy. His vision sharpened dramatically, allowing him to clearly track every movement of the jackalhound. The beast leaped toward him once again, but Yu successfully dodged it. Even so, he remained nervous, because the alien beast had nearly caught him just now. As Yu steadied himself, he realized that the military martial arts from Li Yang's memories had already become instinctive within his body, allowing him to fight naturally without thinking. The alien beast charged at him again. Yu dodged its claws. Then he drove a powerful kick directly into the creature's jaw. The impact sent the beast crashing violently onto the ground. After defeating the alien beast in a single move, Yu stood there in disbelief. He could not help but wonder when exactly he had become this strong. Then his thoughts immediately turned toward the Soul Devouring system. A screen suddenly appeared before him, displaying the effects of the basic military martial arts skill. It increased physical stamina by 10% and granted the ability to identify an opponent's weak points. His current mastery progress with the skill had already reached 10%. Yu could barely believe it. He felt like he had encountered something completely miraculous. To him, this opportunity was nothing short of heaven-defying. Even so, he still could not understand why all of this had suddenly happened to him in the first place. He wondered whether everything was connected to that strange black-bluish mist from earlier. Suddenly, the system detected the corpse nearby and notified him that Soul Devouring was available. Since the Jackalhound's corpse was already lying right beside him, Yu decided to try something. A few moments later, we see Yu place the body inside a box. Quietly, he thanked the dead and wished for them to rest in peace. As he stared at the cremation chamber, he realized that the strange phenomenon earlier had occurred while he was incinerating a corpse. Because of that, he concluded that the same thing should happen again. The moment he touched the alien beast's corpse, black mist immediately flowed out from it. Then, the mist rushed directly into his body. Yu's eyes instantly changed color. And suddenly he let out a loud scream. Memories belonging to the Jackalhound flooded into his mind. The creature had been endlessly hungry, devouring humans over and over, yet it was never satisfied. Yu nearly vomited from the horrifying experience. He wondered if those were truly the memories of the alien beast from when it was alive. At that moment, he realized something terrifying. The warriors fighting on the front lines had to face countless monsters like this every single day. Then another notification suddenly appeared before him. The system announced that it had successfully obtained the soul memory of a level 1 alien beast, the Jackal Hound, and instructed the host to choose one of the following abilities to cultivate. His options were Claw Skill, Devour Technique, or Chaos Consciousness. You suddenly realized that the glowing particles appearing during cremation were merely the trigger needed to unlock the soul-devouring system. He finally understood the mechanism behind it. By making contact with a corpse, he could devour its soul and read its memories. Now the only question was which ability he should choose. The moment Yu considered the possibility that the Devour technique might require eating people, he instantly felt sick to his stomach. There was no way he could ever handle something like that. In the end, he chose the Claw Skill since he had already witnessed its power earlier. To his surprise, his arm suddenly transformed into the clawed arm of an alien beast. The system informed him that the Claw Skill could switch his hands into a claw state during combat. His status window immediately updated. Basic Military Martial Arts Level 1, 10% progress, increased physical stamina by 10%, and allowed perception of an opponent's weak points. Claws. Level 1, 0%. Progress. Increased hand attack power by 5% and inflicted laceration damage on enemies. Yu stared excitedly at his transformed hand before blurting out that attacking with claws was unbelievably cool. Then the system informed him that the Soul Devour skill was currently on cooldown and would only become available again after 12 hours. Yu was surprised to discover that the ability even had a cooldown limit. Realizing there was still a huge amount he did not understand about the system, he decided he needed to properly study it first. So he sat down and started fiddling around with the interface. While reviewing the earlier battle in his mind, Yu remembered that the system had stated a skill's proficiency could increase through repeated use. Then he started wondering what exactly the word absorb meant. Soon, Yu arrived at a possibility. What if repeatedly absorbing the same skill allowed him to stack and strengthen it endlessly? Since he still was not completely certain about his theory, Yu decided that he would properly test it once he got another opportunity later. Then he discovered something surprising. The system itself also had levels. Yu immediately realized that the system could probably be upgraded as well, although there was still no clue about how to actually do it yet. For the moment, he decided it was smarter to focus only on the parts he currently understood and leave figuring out the system upgrades for later. As Yu clenched his fist tightly, he reflected on how practical the basic military martial arts had felt during the fight earlier. Because of that, he decided to use this opportunity to raise its proficiency as quickly as possible. He began visualizing Li Yang's training memories inside his mind. Then he carefully copied every movement. However, Yu quickly realized that the techniques became far more difficult toward the end. At that moment, he finally understood why ordinary students found military martial arts nearly impossible to fully master. Because Yu had inherited so much knowledge from Li Yang's body-forging techniques, the military martial arts no longer felt completely unfamiliar to him. Even though the movements were still difficult, it felt as if he had already practiced them thousands of times before. After going through an entire series of movements, Yu felt his body heating up intensely, so he removed his protective gear. At that moment, he realized that military martial arts were far more difficult than the basic body-forging techniques taught at school. Simply performing the sequence once had already left him somewhat exhausted. However, he also noticed something incredible. The vitality flowing through his body felt smoother and far more concentrated than before. Excited, Yu shouted that he wanted to do it again immediately. The next day, Yu was repeatedly called on in class until he finally jolted awake. The teacher immediately scolded him and demanded to know whether his parents had sent him to school just so he could sleep through lessons. She reminded him that there were only 2 months remaining before the college entrance exams. Then she bluntly stated that with Yu's current vitality level, he would never make it into a university anyway, and would probably end up working construction instead. The classroom instantly burst into laughter. Another student mocked Lin Yu by saying that with such low vitality, he probably would not even be strong enough to carry bricks properly. Yu quietly admitted to the teacher that he was in the wrong. The teacher then dismissed the class. Deep down, however, she felt disappointed in him for not trying harder. In reality, Yu had simply become too excited after training the previous night. He ended up practicing military martial arts non-stop until morning without sleeping at all. However, despite all that effort, his proficiency had only increased to 11%. To Yu, that progress felt painfully slow. He realized that actual combat seemed far more effective for raising proficiency levels. At the same time, he also continued wondering whether repeatedly absorbing abilities would work as well. Just then, someone mocked him again by asking whether their young master still had not gotten enough sleep yet. Lei cruelly sneered that since you would never become a warrior anyway, he might as well drop out of school and take his vegetative sister out onto the streets to beg for money instead. You simply glared at Lei, but Lei immediately sensed that something about you felt different now. Shin scolded Lei for going too far. However, Lei coldly replied that it was none of her business. Without saying another word, you grabbed Shin's hand and started walking away with her. He decided it was better to stay away from Lei before they ended up catching his stupidity too. Shin instantly blushed. She suddenly realized that you somehow looked much more handsome than before. Even his physique appeared noticeably better compared to earlier. Behind them, Lei angrily shouted that you was acting like a coward. He mocked him by saying that a piece of trash was so afraid of getting beaten up that he could only talk tough before running away. That immediately made you stop walking. He turned around and calmly suggested that they head to the martial arts room for a match instead, especially since Lei seemed so desperate to get beaten. The surrounding students instantly burst into laughter. One student pointed out that Lei's vitality level was already 2.7, meaning he had officially reached the standards of a quasi-warrior. The school had even granted him special combat training because of it. Another student scoffed and remarked that a useless trash bag who spent class sleeping should never provoke someone like Lei. However, Yu calmly continued and proposed that the fight would simply be a free sparring match at their own risk. Lei smirked coldly before reminding you that he was the one asking for it. Students rushed across the campus after hearing that 2 high school seniors were about to spar inside the martial arts room. Many became excited, saying it had been a long time since they last watched a real sparring match and that this one would definitely be entertaining. Lei and Yu stood facing each other at the center of the room. Lei's friends laughed confidently, convinced that since Lei's vitality was much higher, he could end the fight with a single punch. Zhang Yang was absent that day, so Lei decided to personally teach Lin Yu a lesson in his place. The school's special combat training was originally designed for talented students with high vitality like him, and he planned to use Yu as the perfect opportunity to show off the results while establishing dominance. Yu calmly remarked that Lei was nothing more than a barking lapdog trying to posture. Lei instantly became irritated and snapped at Yu for talking too much. Meanwhile, Shin quietly worried for Yu's safety. Suddenly, Yu grabbed Lei's hand. Then he reminded both Lei and Zhang Yang that he had already warned them before. One day, they would regret provoking him. Lei froze in shock. He could not believe that a useless piece of trash with only 0.62 vitality possessed more strength than him. Yu forcefully yanked him forward. Then he slammed his knee directly into Lei's jaw. Immediately afterward, Yu punched him straight to the ground. Lei's body slid violently across the floor toward the other side of the room. Panic instantly filled Lei's face after noticing one of his teeth had fallen out. Yu coldly warned him that if he ever insulted his sister again, then next time, losing a single tooth would be the least of his problems. After saying that, Yu grabbed his bag and turned to leave. However, Lei suddenly noticed a sword lying nearby. He grabbed it and charged toward Yu from behind. Yu immediately sensed the attack and countered by transforming his arm into a claw. Lei instantly collapsed onto his backside in fear. Yu calmly asked whether he still wanted to continue the fight. The surrounding students stared in complete shock after witnessing Yu's hand suddenly transform into a clawed beast arm. Lin Shin looked at Yu in amazement and exclaimed that the ability looked unbelievably cool, far better than relying on ordinary weapons. However, another student immediately became terrified and questioned whether Yu had been corrupted, because that claw looked nothing like something a normal human should possess. Lei nervously stammered, before he could even finish threatening that Zhang Yang would never let Yu off for this. Yu calmly replied that he would be waiting for him. That night, the Soul Devour skill's 12-hour cooldown had finally ended, meaning Yu could continue absorbing new abilities once again. He wondered what kind of new gains he would obtain next. Suddenly, a stern-looking man stopped Yu and asked whether he no longer even knew how to greet people properly after meeting them. The man immediately started criticizing the younger generation, complaining that kids these days had absolutely no tact. He grumbled that despite everything he had done for Yu, the boy did not even know how to show basic gratitude. However, Yu knew the truth. The man had only hired him because nobody else wanted to work there. If the pay had not been so good, Yu himself would never have stayed either. The man informed Yu that a large batch of corpses had been delivered for cremation that day. Then, he urged Yu to hurry up and start working, instead of standing around slacking off. After saying that, the man left. Yu entered the room where the corpses had been lined up in rows. He immediately noticed that the number of soldiers' corpses arriving recently had been steadily increasing. As memories from earlier resurfaced in his mind, Yu remembered witnessing scenes of the frontline defenses collapsing under endless waves of alien beasts. That made him wonder whether the borders were truly approaching a dangerous breaking point. However, he quickly dismissed the thought. If something that serious had actually happened, then surely it would already be all over the news. Even so, Yu firmly resolved to strengthen himself as quickly as possible no matter what. Standing before another corpse, Yu quietly apologized to the fallen soldier. Then he gently touched the warrior's forehead, causing black mist to emerge from the body. Yu noticed that the soldier's uniform looked extremely similar to Li Yang's uniform from earlier. Because of that, he guessed that there was a high possibility he could obtain the military combat art skill again. After absorbing the mist, the system announced that it had successfully read the soul memory of first-class soldier Wang Muyang. Yu was then instructed to choose one of the following abilities to cultivate: military combat art, corrupted team badge, or courage to perish together. Without hesitation, he selected military combat art once again. He already knew that absorption was one of the methods used to increase skill proficiency. Now he was finally about to confirm exactly how it worked through the results of this choice. Yu then requested the system to display his personal details. A status window immediately appeared before him, revealing that his beginner military combat art had successfully advanced to level 2 with 10% proficiency. The upgraded skill now enhanced his base physical fitness by 20%, allowed him to perceive an opponent's weak points, and even granted him the ability to predict enemy attacks half a second before they happened whenever an opponent launched an attack. Yu became excited after discovering that repeatedly absorbing the same skill could directly upgrade it. At that moment, he concluded that he would eventually be able to raise his skills to the maximum level extremely quickly. However, the system then informed him that the Soul Devour skill had once again entered cooldown and could not be used again for another 12 hours. Only then did Yu remember that the ultimate skill came with a cooldown restriction, meaning he could not endlessly spam it whenever he wanted. Since he had no choice but to wait, Yu decided to spend the remaining time continuing to improve his military combat art proficiency instead. At the front line, workers carefully carried a man's corpse onto the transport vehicle. His cervical vertebrae had been completely shattered, leaving only torn flesh and skin barely holding his neck together. They had to move him extremely carefully to prevent the head from separating entirely. Nearby, truckloads of jackal hound corpses were also being loaded into the transport vehicles. One of the workers loudly announced that corpse transport vehicle number 1 had been fully loaded and was ready to depart. The driver immediately started the engine. Then the transport vehicle slowly drove away from the front line. However, none of them realized the horrifying truth hidden within the mountain of corpses they were transporting. Something inside was still alive. And it was a ferocious alien beast. Meanwhile, at the academy, several bullies blocked Shin's path on the staircase. They surrounded her while openly intimidating her. Zhang Yang instructed her to tell Lin Yu to meet him at the sports field after school because he wanted to have a little talk with him. If Yu lost, then he would have to kneel down and personally apologize to Lei. Only then would Zhang consider the matter settled. Then he threatened Shin directly, warning her that if she refused, she would not be leaving the corridor safely that day. Shin argued that Lei had been the one who attacked first. She pointed out that they were clearly the bullies and that Yu had done absolutely nothing wrong. Lei instantly became annoyed and told Zhang Yang to stop wasting time talking to Shin because she was obviously siding with Yu already. He even accused her of happily laughing while Yu beat him up the previous day. Shin angrily shouted that he was spouting complete nonsense because she had never done anything like that. Suddenly, one of the boys snatched the notebook from her arms. The bald student laughed mockingly while asking why she looked so nervous. Then he teased her by suggesting that she had specially prepared the notebook for Yu. Lei suddenly shoved Shin backward while shouting at her to behave herself. Meanwhile, the bald student casually flipped through the notebook while loudly reading the highlighted notes and detailed explanations written inside. He sarcastically commented on how unbelievably dedicated Shin had been. Then the bald student sneered that no matter how much effort she spent helping Yu, trash would always remain trash in the end. Right after saying that, he ripped the notebook apart. Lei mocked Shin while telling her that this was exactly what happened when she chose to help the wrong person. Zhao ordered her to let go while laughing at her for crying over something as meaningless as a notebook. However, Zhang Yang only grabbed her chin even harder and leaned his face closer toward hers, while repeating that staying beside him was infinitely better than hanging around a useless loser like Yu. Shin angrily shouted at him to get lost again before suddenly biting his finger. Enraged, Zhang Yang immediately slapped her across the face while calling her an ungrateful bitch. Lei laughed and remarked that the slap was well-deserved. According to him, Shin's actions showed complete disrespect toward Zhang Yang. Shin held her swollen cheek as tears filled her eyes. She had spent half an entire month carefully preparing those notes for you. Desperately, she reached toward the bald student, trying to retrieve the notebook because she could not allow them to completely destroy it. Zhang Yang coldly told her that she truly did not know what was good for her. Then he grabbed her by the neck and pinned her directly against the wall. Zhang Yang tightened his grip around Shin's neck while pointing out the massive gap in vitality between them. He arrogantly declared that his strength and speed ranked #1 in the entire school. According to him, resisting him would only lead to even more suffering. Then he sneered and claimed that since Shin apparently enjoyed getting physically hurt so much, he would personally make sure she learned a lesson she would never forget. Zhang Yang ordered the others to attack Shin together. He arrogantly declared that even if she ended up crippled afterward, he would take full responsibility for it. One of the students immediately stepped forward and prepared to punch her, claiming that this was the price of opposing Zhang Yang. Suddenly, someone grabbed the attacker's arm mid-swing. It was Lin Yu. Our boy coldly questioned how they could feel absolutely no shame ganging up 4 against a single girl. Jin immediately told you that she was fine. She desperately begged him not to get dragged into another conflict with them again. However, Yu suddenly twisted the man's arm violently. Zhang Yang smirked and remarked that Yu had finally shown up, saving them the trouble of searching for him themselves. Behind Zhang Yang, Zhao Lei and the others stood ready with hostile expressions as they surrounded both Lin Yu and Lin Xin. Yu bent down and picked up one of the scattered notebook pages. It contained detailed key points regarding the warrior assessment, along with a small encouraging message Shin had personally written for him at the bottom. Yu calmly stated that he would deal with this group the same way people dealt with wild dogs that bit others and tore apart important things. Zhang Yang sneered and mocked Yu for talking so boldly despite being trash. Yu did not waste another second. Without any warning, he punched Zhang Yang directly in the face. Yu shouted that he would never forgive them for daring to hit Shin. Although Zhang Yang managed to stabilize himself before crashing completely, his expression immediately darkened. Yu declared that he would personally repay the humiliation Shin suffered today. The surrounding students stared at Lin Yu in total disbelief, wondering whether he had completely lost his mind for daring to speak to Zhang Yang like that. They could barely believe it. Yu had already beaten Zhao Lei the day before, and now he even intended to challenge Zhang Yang himself. Lei loudly encouraged Zhang Yang to beat Yu to death. At that moment, a powerful pressure burst out from Zhang Yang's body. He remarked that he had never realized Yu possessed this much backbone before. However, simply beating Yu there would be far too merciful. Instead, Zhang Yang publicly announced that 3 days later, they would settle everything in an official duel at the central training grounds. He declared that if Yu won, he would personally apologize, compensate him, and guarantee that he would never cause trouble for him again. Then Zhang Yang threw the Qingteng Academy public duel application form directly toward Yu. However, if Yu lost, he would have to kneel before the entire school, publicly admit that he was trash, and voluntarily withdraw from the academy. The crowd immediately became worried for Yu, because a public duel meant the entire school would witness the battle. The surrounding students quickly understood Zhang Yang's true intention. He wanted to completely destroy Yu in front of everyone. Some students even mocked Yu openly and claimed that his arrogance had already doomed him. Meanwhile, Shin desperately warned Yu not to accept the duel. She reminded him that his sister was still waiting for him to take care of her. One of the classmates quickly warned Yu that dropping out of school was not something he should joke about. They reminded him that Zhang Yang's vitality had already reached 3.5, while Yu's vitality had not even broken past 1 yet. The gap between them was simply too massive. In their eyes, there was no possible way Yu could defeat him. Because of that, they begged him not to act impulsively. Meanwhile, Zhao Lei mocked Yu and suggested that if he was truly scared, then he should kneel down, kowtow 3 times, and beg Zhang Yang for mercy instead. Another one of Zhang Yang's lackeys sneered that trash would always remain trash no matter how much it pretended to act tough. However, Yu calmly declared that he would accept the duel under one condition. He wanted the entire duel to be fully recorded and publicly broadcasted. Then Yu signed the duel application form without hesitation. Afterward, he threw the document directly back at Zhang Yang. The duel would take place in 3 days, and Yu wanted the entire school to remember forever exactly who the real trash truly was. A few hours later, at the crematorium, Yu unlocked the heavy door and stepped inside. As he walked in, he kept thinking about how the next 3 days would determine everything. He resolved to train his basic military martial arts with everything he had, while also absorbing as many new skills as possible. No matter what happened, he was absolutely determined to win the duel 3 days from now. A man suddenly informed him that the latest batch of corpses had been transferred there because crematorium, #1, could no longer handle the overwhelming workload by itself anymore. Yu was surprised to hear that since crematorium #1 was normally responsible for processing the corpses of far more powerful alien beasts. The man proudly replied that the influx of corpses simply proved how capable their crematorium truly was. Then he loudly praised Mr. Wang, claiming that everything was possible because of his excellent leadership. He also mentioned that Wang was a teachable kid and currently possessed the highest vitality among all the workers there. He advised Yu to work harder as well and promised that he would treat him properly in the future. However, the next second, the man suddenly shouted at Yu and demanded to know whether he planned to stand there forever doing nothing. He reminded Yu that if he still wanted to get paid, then he needed to hurry up and get back to work immediately. Yu replied that he was already going. Deep down, though, he thought about how this old geezer switched attitudes faster than flipping pages in a book. Then he loudly shut the door behind him. Meanwhile, inside Incineration Room 7, Wang realized that he would have to work overtime because of the sudden flood of alien beast corpses arriving that night. Then, something suddenly moved. Wang froze in surprise. The corpse behind him abruptly stood back up. Before he could even react, the creature clawed him to death. Then the monster dragged Wang's corpse away and quietly shut the incineration room door behind it. Meanwhile, Yu suddenly heard someone scream from incineration. Room 6. However, the crematorium quickly fell silent again, making Yu wonder whether he had simply imagined the sound. In the end, he decided to ignore it and return to work instead. The moment he entered the room, he was surprised to discover that all the corpses assigned to him that day were alien beasts. Because of that, he realized he would not be able to improve his military combat art through absorbing soldier memories that night. Still, he tried to stay positive by thinking that fewer frontline soldier casualties was ultimately a good thing. However, one particular corpse immediately caught his attention. Something about its tail looked strange. Yu was certain that the color had looked different earlier, so he carefully observed it more closely. That only made him more confused, because the scales appeared to be changing colors. Suddenly, the corpse lunged directly at him. Yu was shocked. He barely managed to dodge in time. The moment the alien beast landed, it immediately turned toward him again. After that, the beast disappeared. Yu froze in surprise after realizing something horrifying. The creature had never crawled out of the corpse in the first place. It had been perfectly camouflaged among the rotting flesh the entire time. At that moment, Yu realized that monsters had been sneaking in through this exact method all along. And he knew that if he didn't do something now, this entire place would turn into hell. He closed his eyes and sharpened all of his senses. Using the insight granted by his military combat art, he searched for the alien beast's weakness. Then, he heard footsteps, now that he had found it. He grabbed a tool from the table and threw the wrench straight at it. The moment it got hit, the creature revealed itself. Yu immediately yelled at it to get out of there. The alien beast lunged at him, but Yu slashed forward with his claws, piercing straight through the alien beast's body. He made sure not to let himself get corrupted. Thankfully, his level 2 military combat art allowed him to predict the attack path ahead of time, so he only suffered a minor scratch. At that moment, an emergency broadcast echoed throughout the facility. The announcement warned everyone that phantom-scale beasts had appeared in rooms 3, 7, 14, and 15. All personnel were ordered to evacuate immediately to the central safe room and wait for military rescue. Yu was stunned that the monsters had already infiltrated the other incineration rooms as well. He quickly opened the door to his incineration room. He sensed that there were no supernatural ability fluctuations nearby, meaning he still had a chance to escape safely. But then he froze in shock. Wang's corpse was lying along the way. Yu finally realized that the scream he heard earlier had come from him. It made him wonder just how many alien beasts had already snuck inside. Then he spotted the manager and several other workers running toward him while desperately begging for help because 3 alien beasts were chasing after them. Yu immediately threw the wrench again. It smashed directly into one of the alien beasts. A man from the other side of the door shouted at them to hurry and get inside. Yu yelled for everyone to quickly enter the safe room. Deep down, he admitted that he wasn't confident he could fight that many monsters at once. To him, reaching the safe zone and waiting for rescue was the safer choice. But suddenly, someone shoved him forward and ordered him to cover the rear. The manager sneered that a piece of trash like him was perfect for that role. The alien beast rapidly closed in on Yu. He cursed those bastards under his breath. He kicked the alien beast away. Yu realized just how terrifying the camouflage abilities of these alien beasts truly were. If he let his guard down for even a second, he would never notice them hiding nearby. Someone suddenly shouted to forget about Yu and focus on closing the door immediately. Yu desperately tried to chase after them while yelling for them to wait, but before he could reach the door, it slammed shut. From the other side of the door, Yu could hear them talking about him. They said not to worry about him because if he died, it would just mean one less burden to deal with. He screamed at them to open the door. He kept banging on it desperately, but then he noticed the alien beasts getting closer. What shocked him even more was that these monsters actually knew how to coordinate with each other. Yu realized that no matter how hard he tried, that door was never going to open. Escape was no longer an option. He understood that he had no choice left except to fight back. He thought about the frontline soldiers who faced situations far worse than this every single day, yet still overcame their fear and fought bravely against the enemy. Since he had inherited their skills, he refused to disgrace them. Besides, his sister was still waiting for him, so he absolutely could not die there. He locked onto his first target. The alien beast was visibly caught off guard. It tried to hide itself and become invisible. But then, Yu realized that now that his proficiency in military combat art had increased, he could focus far more clearly and sense the fluctuations of energy around him. And because of that, he could also pinpoint their weak spots. Our boy was locked in. He slashed his claw directly into the alien beast's weak point, but another one was already charging toward him. Yu immediately flung the alien beast, impaled on his claw, straight toward the second monster. At that moment, he slowly started believing that maybe he could actually survive this if he kept fighting. The two alien beasts crashed onto the ground together. Then Yu immediately charged toward the third one. He slammed his attack straight into its head. Now there were only two left, but to his surprise, they suddenly disappeared. The remaining two beasts were clearly much stronger, and this time he could no longer sense their energy fluctuations. Yu knew they were still nearby, so he couldn't afford to lower his guard for even a second. He forced himself to calm down and wait for an opening. Then, he closed his eyes and sharpened all of his senses. Until suddenly, he heard the sound of blood dripping. He listened carefully, and eventually, he found it. It was hiding on the wall. Yu instantly struck its neck. But then, Yu suddenly sensed something behind him, and in the next instant, he was struck. Blood splattered from his arm from the sneak attack. His left hand was nearly destroyed. The alien beast that had been in front of him was already gone. But Yu refused to let it escape. Then suddenly, he noticed blood dripping from above. He immediately realized that the alien beast was hiding on the ceiling, and at the same time, it lunged toward him as well. Yu revealed that he had intentionally covered the creature in his own blood earlier. Both of them charged at each other simultaneously. Yu leaped high into the air to reach it, and slashed deeply across its body. The alien beast crashed heavily onto the ground, but Yu was already reaching his limit too. Even so, he forced himself to endure because he still couldn't afford to collapse yet. He desperately wanted to escape from this place, but before he could even move further, he collapsed beside the corpses of the alien beasts. Yu completely lost consciousness, unaware that dark mist from the dead monsters was slowly being absorbed into his body. Moments later, we see men rushed forward since they were only 30 meters away from the safe room. The captain immediately warned the group that a suspected monster had been spotted ahead and ordered everyone to stay alert. One of the men stared ahead in complete shock. He couldn't believe the kid had really done all of this alone. Their flashlights landed on Yu, who was lying in a pool of blood beside the corpses of the alien beasts. The manager quickly rushed out from the safe room, relieved that the rescue team had finally arrived. The captain informed him that the area was secure now. He ordered Team 1 to assist the survivors while Team 2 inspected the scene. As he examined one of the alien beast corpses, he noticed that the tear marks were uneven and messy. He could immediately tell that ordinary weapons could not have caused wounds like these. Suddenly, one of the soldiers shouted that the kid was still alive. The manager immediately pointed toward Yu's hand. It had transformed into a monster claw. The soldiers instantly became alert after identifying it as a mutation, concluding that the kid had already been corrupted. One soldier suggested that since Yu was still unconscious, they should eliminate him immediately before he turned into a monster. But the captain suddenly ordered everyone to wait after noticing Yu's hand changing again. The manager nervously asked what they were waiting for. He claimed that if the kid woke up, everyone there would be doomed. But deep down, the manager simply couldn't allow Yu to survive. Otherwise, the truth about setting him up would eventually be exposed. The captain immediately pointed his sword at the manager and coldly warned him to shut up unless he wanted to die first. Then the captain explained that the traces around Yu, along with the flesh and scales stuck between his fingers, all proved that he had personally killed Polyphantom Scales. The soldier was completely overwhelmed. Even their entire squad would struggle to handle 4 Phantom Scales at once, yet this kid had somehow killed all of them alone. The manager argued that Yu's vitality was only 0.68, so there was no way he could accomplish something like that unless he had already been corrupted. He insisted again that they should just kill him now. The captain lifted Yu's mutated hand, while silently thinking about how a person with only 0.68 vitality had somehow solo killed 4 phantom scales. To him, that level of talent could only belong to a legendary prodigy. He admitted that corruption was normally irreversible, but since Yu's body was clearly recovering, it meant there was no actual problem. He then questioned why the manager was panicking so much in the first place. The manager nervously replied that he was simply concerned about everyone's safety. The captain pointed out that they were currently short-handed, and fighters with this level of ability were exactly what they desperately needed right now. He declared that his squad would take over from there and ordered everyone to fall in line. The next day, at the hospital, Yu was lying on the bed when faint sounds slowly woke him up. He suddenly jolted awake and realized he was inside a hospital room. The captain assured him that he was safe now. Yu immediately asked who they were. The man introduced himself as Chen Zhen and explained that he was the captain of the district corruption cleanup squad. Chen Zhen told him that he came there personally to apologize. He explained that the alien beast invasion from last night happened because of their failure, and because they arrived late to the rescue operation, Yu had been placed in extreme danger. He sincerely apologized for it. Yu replied that everything had happened too suddenly, so it wasn't really something they could have prevented. Captain Chen then told him that he had managed to kill 4 phantom scales by himself, and one of them had even reached the elite level. Then he directly asked Yu if he wanted to become a warrior and join their squad. Yu smiled in disbelief and asked if something like that was really possible for him. Captain Chen explained that most people would hesitate after hearing such an offer, yet Yu looked genuinely excited instead. That made him curious why Yu wanted to become a warrior so badly. Yu explained that he had seen far too many monsters and far too many brave warriors sacrificing their lives at the crematorium. And recently, the number of warriors dying had only continued to increase. So rather than staying behind and waiting helplessly for death, he wanted to fight back himself so he could better protect his family. Captain Chen nodded and told him that was a good mindset. However, before officially joining the squad, he would first need to pass the warrior selection trial. Deep down, Captain Chen thought that this kid possessed not only talent and strength, but also the resolve to sacrifice himself for the sake of his family. In his eyes, Yu clearly had tremendous potential, but Yu suddenly became discouraged because the warrior selection trial normally required a vitality level of at least 3 or higher. Then, Captain Chen revealed that Yu had already met the qualifications now. He handed him a recommendation letter. He informed Yu that the trial would begin in exactly 1 month. Before leaving, Captain Chen reminded him to prepare well for it. Yu felt genuinely happy because once he became a warrior, he would gain access to the best medical resources available. That meant there might finally be hope for curing his sister's illness. At that moment, the system began reading the soul memory of the elite-level phantom scale. Yu immediately recognized it as the same soul he had absorbed the previous day. The system instructed him to choose one of the following abilities to cultivate: Scale Armor Defense, Claw Enhancement, or Aura Camouflage. Yu became excited as he realized that his desperate fight last night had not been meaningless after all. Then he started wondering which ability he should choose. He realized that the hard scales possessed incredible defensive power and could withstand heavy damage. He also understood that Claw Enhancement would further increase his offensive strength. Then, he remembered how terrifying the alien beast's Aura Camouflage ability had been. If it weren't for the blood dripping from the creature earlier, that elite-level camouflage would have been absolutely perfect. After thinking it through, Yu decided to choose that ability instead. The system informed Yu that the duration of Aura Camouflage depended entirely on the host's physical stamina. The ability allowed the user to completely conceal their aura and blend perfectly into the surrounding environment. Yu quickly realized that the hiding effect was still incomplete, meaning he needed far more practice to fully master it. He then reviewed the details of his current skills. First was Basic Military Martial Arts Level 2. It increased physical stamina by 20%, allowed him to detect an opponent's weak spots, and even predict attack directions less than half a second before the enemy moved. Then there was Claw Level 1, which enhanced hand attacks by 5%, while also inflicting tearing damage on enemies. Lastly, there was Aura Camouflage Level 1. The skill concealed the user's aura, making the body translucent while standing still and blurry while moving. The duration lasted for half of the user's physical stamina limit. Since he could not devour souls for the time being, Yu decided to push his current abilities to their absolute limit through training alone. Now, he finally had another trump card prepared for his duel against Zhang Yang next week. After that, our boy started his training. Aura Camouflage was far more than simple invisibility. It was the ability to become one with the environment itself. During one of his training sessions, a bird suddenly landed on his shoulder. At that moment, Yu realized he still couldn't deceive animals yet. That made him understand that he needed to suppress and control his own energy as much as possible, just like the monsters did. Because of that, he continued training relentlessly, even late into the night. Eventually, Yu began sensing that both his concealment range and the level of invisibility were gradually improving. Realizing the method was working, he decided to continue practicing that way. Yu stood silently in front of the mirror and slowly extended his hand toward it. Then he held it there without moving. He noticed that half of his body had already turned invisible, meaning the remaining half was all that still needed improvement. Suddenly, the system notified him that the proficiency of Aura Camouflage Level 1 had increased by 5%. Yu smiled in satisfaction after finally reaching his goal. He swore to himself that he would make Yang understand who the real trash truly was. With that, the day of the duel finally came. It was being held at the Qingtang Academy training grounds. One student remarked that it was their first time watching a public duel. They believed that not only would Yu get expelled after losing, but he would also completely embarrass himself in front of everyone. Another student mocked Yu, calling him trash with only 0.68 vitality. To them, the entire fight would be nothing more than a one-sided beating. Shin noticed that Yu had been absent for several days and wondered if something had happened to him. Lei informed Yang that all the traps around the stage had already been prepared. He confidently guaranteed that Yu would not be leaving alive today. Yang stepped onto the battle stage. This guy tried so hard to aura farm. But boy, you don't look cool. Then he mockingly asked where that trash Lin Yu was. He wondered if Yu had gotten so scared that he decided to run away at the last second instead. The teacher sighed helplessly and remarked that Lin Yu clearly didn't know his own limits. In her eyes, expulsion was already guaranteed for him. Then the door suddenly opened, and Yu walked inside. He slowly climbed the staircase. As he approached the battle stage, he noticed that the color of several floorboards near the edge looked strangely different. Yang sneered that Yu had finally shown up. He thought Yu had already deserted out of fear. Yu calmly replied that Yang should start thinking about how he was going to kneel and apologize later instead. Yang cursed at him for shamelessly bragging and roared for him to die before immediately attacking. Yu effortlessly dodged the punch. Yang laughed after seeing him evade and mocked him for running away already. He challenged Yu to see how long he could keep dodging forever. Lei cheered loudly for Yang and shouted for him to beat Lin Yu badly enough to finally make him understand the difference between them. While retreating, Yu suddenly stepped onto one of the red floorboards. Yang immediately grinned because, in his eyes, Yu no longer had anywhere left to escape. Yang declared that a single punch from him would send Yu packing for good. The attack landed, but Yu suddenly smiled and revealed that this exact moment was what he had been waiting for all along. Just as Yang's attack was about to land, Yu disappeared. The spectators were instantly shocked after seeing him vanish into thin air. They couldn't understand what kind of ability he was using. Shin, meanwhile, became excited after realizing that Yu had actually prepared a hidden trump card. Yang scoffed and mocked him, asking if he really believed a cheap little parlor trick like that could win him the fight. He screamed at Yu to show himself immediately. But in the next second, Yang was suddenly struck from behind. That only made him even angrier. He swore right there that he would kill Yu no matter what. Then he ordered Lei to activate the hidden mechanisms and force Yu out into the open. Electricity instantly surged through the surrounding fences. And soon after, flames erupted everywhere. The entire battle arena became surrounded by fire. The teacher immediately shouted at them to stop because this clearly violated the rules of the duel. But Yang arrogantly declared that he himself was the rule. Yu was suddenly caught within the flames, and that was how Yang finally located him. Yang tried to punch Yu, but instead his fist smashed directly into the floor. Yu understood that fighting someone stronger than himself head-on would give him absolutely no chance of winning. If he wanted to survive, he first needed to locate his opponent's weakness. Then, destroy it in a single, decisive strike. Yang continued charging toward him relentlessly. Yu carefully observed the flow of energy circulating throughout Yang's entire body. At the same time, a full layer of armor covered him as well. Yu realized that if he could find the source of that power and interrupt the energy flow, he might still have a chance. Then he noticed something glowing faintly in the center of Yang's chest. He had found the core. The moment Yang swung another punch toward him, Yu dodged again and immediately turned invisible. Yang became increasingly irritated after seeing him disappear once more. He cursed that trash would always remain trash. In his eyes, Yu only knew how to rely on dirty little tricks. But at that exact moment, Yu suddenly charged straight at him. He slashed forward with his claw, attempting to tear through Yang's body. But to Yu's surprise, the claw couldn't pierce the armor at all. Yang arrogantly declared that his defense was A rank. He mocked Yu and told him that if he seriously believed cheap tricks like that could hurt him, then he would have to wait until his next life for it to happen. Yu immediately realized that he needed another opening. He wanted to test exactly how durable Yang's armor truly was. Then he noticed several faint blue marks appearing across the armor's surface. That observation made him realize that the armor's damage absorption had limits after all. If the claw couldn't penetrate it, then he would use the blunt impact techniques from his military martial arts to completely shatter the armor instead. Meanwhile, Yang thought that as long as he carefully observed Yu's movements, he would eventually find a flaw. Yu's hands had already returned to normal as he rushed forward and threw another punch. The impact carried tremendous force. Yang mocked him for being weak, then he immediately counterattacked. At that moment, Yang noticed a fluctuation of energy nearby. He grinned and declared that he had finally found Yu's weakness. But right then, Yu threw another punch straight at him. Yang reminded Yu that his defense was A rank and arrogantly claimed that no matter how many times Yu attacked, it would all be completely useless. Then he landed a heavy blow that sent Yu flying backward. Yu quickly stabilized himself before taunting Yang and telling him to come at him again. As Yang attacked once more, Yu dodged the punch while targeting the glowing core in his chest again. This time, Yu noticed small cracks forming on the armor. That was when he realized it only needed one final push to break completely. Yang was caught off guard when Yu suddenly attacked again, but this time, Yang managed to grab Yu's arm. He sneered and declared that Yu's little tricks were useless now. Meanwhile, Yu believed that as long as he could endure the attacks predicted by his military combat art, the advantage would eventually become his. Yang tightly held onto Yu's arm while continuously punching him. Then Yu found the exact timing he had been waiting for. He slammed another punch directly into the same spot on Yang's chest. The armor weakened even further. Yang mocked Yu again, saying all he knew how to do was turn invisible and rely on sneak attacks. He claimed it was no surprise that Yu's vitality was only 0.68 and declared that someone like him was completely unworthy of becoming a warrior. But then, Yu calmly declared that from this moment onward, he would no longer rely on invisibility or sneak attacks. He decided that the match would end with one final decisive move. Yang laughed and thought Yu had completely lost his mind if he believed that broken claw of his could ever scratch A-rank armor. Yu replied that they would never know unless they tried one more time. Yang arrogantly declared that his next kick would personally send Yu flying out of the academy forever. The two of them charged toward each other simultaneously. Yu immediately realized that Yang's kick had been aimed to kill him. Fortunately, his military combat art had already predicted the attack beforehand. He calmly told Yang that he could already see through all of his movements. Yang instantly became furious. But then, to his shock, cracks suddenly spread throughout his armor. And in the next second, the entire armor completely shattered apart, making Yang scream in agony. Yang refused to accept his defeat and screamed that it was impossible for him to lose against trash like Yu. Yu calmly replied that Yang was nothing special either. That only made Yang even angrier. But suddenly his body gave out and he collapsed face first onto the ground. The crowd was completely stunned by what they had just witnessed. They couldn't believe that Yu, the so-called trash with only 0.68 vitality, had actually won. Meanwhile, others excitedly cheered and shouted that Lin Yu was incredible. Even Lei was left in shock that Zhang Yang had truly lost. Xin, however, smiled because she had believed from the very beginning that Yu would win. Inside Qingteng Academy, board director Zhang Jiangguo, and also Zhang Yang's father, felt utterly humiliated. He couldn't believe that his own son had lost to someone publicly known as trash. Li Minyu, the dean of academic affairs at Qingteng Academy, admitted that it was his responsibility that Yu had somehow learned techniques beyond the academy's official teachings. He explained that although he did not know what kind of unorthodox methods Yu had used, he was certain that Yu's body had undergone some kind of transformation. He promised that during next week's physical examination, he would thoroughly investigate the matter and provide a proper explanation to the academy. Director Zhang coldly declared that anyone who violated the school's rules would eventually pay the price for it. Minyu assured Director Zhang that he would absolutely deliver a satisfactory result. Director Zhang then warned Yu that there were certain people in this world he simply could not afford to offend, and that his ignorance would eventually come back to haunt him. As Yu walked down from the arena, he suddenly received a message. Captain Chen informed him that starting that day, he would officially begin working part-time at the crematorium. The message explained that the place often handled high-risk monster corpses along with human remains, so Yu was told to stay cautious and prepared at all times. He was slightly surprised to suddenly receive a direct message from Captain Chen. He quickly realized that the crematorium not only offered extremely high pay, but also gave him opportunities to come into contact with even stronger abilities. Since it was still early, Yu decided to visit the hospital first to see his sister. At City Central Hospital, Yu visited his sister's medical pod. Her body was wrapped in bandages, while multiple machines remained connected to her to keep her alive. Yu softly told her that he had come to see her. Back when Yu was a child, other kids constantly mocked him. They said that with such pathetic vitality, he was worse than a dog and would remain crippled for the rest of his life. One boy even repeated what his father had said, that Yu would never have any future at all. But suddenly, a girl angrily stepped forward and demanded to know how they dared bully her younger brother. She threatened to beat them all into a pulp if they continued. The boys immediately called her a tigress before running away in fear. She shouted after them that if they ever badmouthed her brother again, she would never let them off. Yu gently told his older sister not to get angry over them, but she told him not to listen to those idiots. To her, Yu was the best no matter what anyone else said. Yu remembered how his sister had always protected him ever since they were children, and because of that, no matter what happened, he swore he would definitely find a way to cure her illness. Just then, someone informed him that they needed to discuss his sister's condition. Yu immediately told the doctor to continue. The doctor explained that, as Yu already knew, his sister's illness had been caused by accidentally consuming food contaminated with corruption. At the current stage, all they could do was maintain her most basic vital signs. However, the corruption inside her body had recently worsened at an alarming rate and had already spread into her internal organs. At this pace, she likely had only half a year left to live at most. Yu was shocked to hear that. Her condition had always been stabilized through medication, so he couldn't understand how things had suddenly deteriorated so badly. The doctor explained that based on their analysis, Yu's sister had likely developed resistance to the medication after taking it for such a long time. Yu desperately asked if there was any other possible way to save her. He swore he would do absolutely anything as long as it meant saving his sister's life. The doctor admitted that there was one possible method, but realistically, it was nearly impossible. Yu immediately demanded to know more details. The doctor explained that if they could obtain a sunstone capable of suppressing corruption, it might be possible to stop his sister's condition from worsening. However, the sunstone was considered a national treasure and was not something the state would easily allow anyone to use. He added that even back then, when Yu's sister had been regarded as a once-in-a-generation prodigy heavily valued by the state, they still refused to use the sunstone after she fell into a coma. So with her current condition now, there was even less chance they would agree to use it. Yu thought about how his sister's talent had once been so overwhelming that she had outshined an entire generation. He simply couldn't understand why the state had refused to save her back then. To him, it felt completely unreasonable. Even so, Yu swore to himself that no matter the reason, whether it involved obtaining the sunstone or finding another method entirely, he would never give up on saving his sister. At Crematorium 1, Yu was making his way toward Room 3. Yu realized that since the sunstone was tied directly to the state, the only way forward was for him to grow stronger and become a warrior as quickly as possible. As he looked around at the corpses, he wondered if the frontline situation had become even worse recently. There were barely any alien beast corpses now, while human remains were piling up everywhere instead. Yu silently prayed for the dead lying before him, but suddenly one of the corpses behind him slowly stood up. Then it began walking toward him. Yu immediately sensed it. He instantly became alert as the reanimated corpse charged straight toward him.